Welcome back. Today's video, we're going to talk about the home prices across Florida and specifically compared to Orlando. We're going to talk about how many of these homes are closing, how much and how high are unsold inventory stacking up. We're also going to delve into the insights on the interest rate, how it's affecting the economy. It's getting volatile in relation to some of the policies that Trump has enacted because here we are, the Trump tariffs, that policy seeping its way not just in the stock market, but undeniably, it's having some effects on housing market as well. And now, just now, because we are having a lot of national narrative shifts in how maybe delicate the housing market is. And this is largely for the past couple of years, when you're talking about possible changes and shifts in housing, most of it's been largely in the South or even in the East, talking about Texas, talking about the Sun Belt states like Georgia and Florida. And ultimately now the narrative across the country is starting to shift because now you're seeing headlines like this one from Yahoo talking about when is the housing market going to turn and tip over? And this was released in the past month. Behind that, you had Zillow, who had previously made a prediction that 2025 would be positive growth for the housing market, has just come out and said between March of 25 and 26, you can expect national home value declines. So we're going to delve into all of the details and talk about exactly what's going on so you can plan accordingly. Let's get into the news. So today we're going to answer the question, are the conditions right for a price collapse in Florida or Orlando here in 2025? And how does it look right now? Now, just for context, let's go back 6 years. So you can see where my cursor is here in the middle of the chart. This is the closed sales volume, March 2019. This is pre-COVID. This is before chaos ensued in the housing market. You were closing 25,013 homes. Now, right now, you can see that Florida last month in March posted slightly less than 25,000 units. We're getting close to where it was. And ultimately, how does it look against last year? Well, you can see we have 2 lagging months of supply right here. And some things are just out of balance certain months. Like look at this. December, which was an unusually busy month for us because it was just post-election cycle, we had almost 13% more sales close in December as a result of all the contracts that went and had, found themselves going through the process. Okay, so now we understand. And by the way, if you look month after month in Florida, and I think you're going to see the same in Orlando, we're down a little. We're a little softer in how many buyers are closing on properties. Why? Because we already know they're finding it unaffordable. Prices are still high and those kinds of things. Well, look at this. This is the new listing volume. Look at going back a year. How many negative months do you see where we actually are listing fewer homes than a year prior? Look, you can see March we're up 10%, up 3%. Up 15. January, look at January, just absolutely surged. But let's take a look again at history. Remember, I just showed you closings are down versus pre-pandemic. Are new listings still down pre-pandemic? Because we got to look at both supply and demand. We obviously know buyers are a little less interested, which is why closings are off, but our sellers finally pushing into the market. And look what you see here. March 2019, we had 33,000 homes hit the market. Look at March 2005. 36,000 homes hit the market. Now understand this, month after month, if you go back into the 2019 pre-pandemic levels, you can see, look how high 2025 is even relative to the last couple of years. See this arc of activity right here? If you circle this and draw lines back, we didn't hit this all the way till going back to about July of 2022 when interest rates started to surge. We're just a little bit, sellers this year, for whatever reason, have decided today's the day. I'm out. I'm going to put my house on the market and I'm going to sell. Now, not all of them are leaving them there. So one of the things we are noticing is there's a 10% fail rate, meaning that approximately 10% of all the homes that go to the market, 10% pull off the market and completely go away. They will not sell. And ultimately, that tells us that sellers are holding out for a price and the buyers are standing them off, and some of them will rather quit. Now look at this. This is the ultimate activity level that we need to watch because Florida's unsold inventory, look at this. This is kind of what we talk about all the time. It's climbing, right? So way down here, you are in a hugely seller-favored market. Sellers could, there's such few homes on the market back in 2021 that buyers would have absorbed them all in weeks, literally a couple weeks, all that inventory. When you're this low in history, this is not enough houses for sale. But look where we are today. So right now, this is the most recent chart of single family homes in the entire state, 114,000. If you cut a line, you can see that just before pandemic 2019, we're a little up on that, okay? But you can see in history, look at the last time we had an actual serious correction in the housing market. We had almost double the homes you have today. And today we have a larger population base. So theoretically, if all things were equal, and today we had as many homes per owner on the market as you did back here, the numbers would have to be pushing 260 or 270, some big number. So you can see in history, we're nowhere near where we need to be to see price change. Now, what can we say about the housing market is, as you can see on screen, I have the median home price. And most of the charts, if you look at any city across the country or any state, they had a spike here. This is when interest rates shifted, and then they dropped, and some of them have never come back to this peak. They've dropped and they just kept going down this way and kind of flattening down here. But what would you describe this chart? Would you say this is declining? Would you say it's growing? Or would you say it's flat? Okay, it's flat, right? Why is it flat? Because sellers in Orlando and sellers in Florida at large do not have a grip over the buyer. There's not an excessive amount of inventory that can actually impact the buyer having to pay more, so prices aren't climbing. On the other hand, there's enough buyers and enough buyer demand, and enough people still remotely moving to Florida that prices are maintaining, okay? I'm going to come back to this because I will argue that this is a price correction. I'm going to argue this is a price correction. Jerry, you're saying this is a correction? It looks flat to me. Yeah, it's a correction based in history. Let's move on to Orlando. Now look at Orlando's closed sales. You can see that over this last year, much like the state of Florida, buyer activity has been anemic. You're going to see some negatives. Like February was off 10%. This March that just passed here in Orlando, we just met even with the year prior as it relates to March. January is a little positive. December was a lot positive, which we felt that here in Orlando. A lot of buyer activity here. And then it got quiet, and then it's getting busy again. So you're going to see, I believe, April's going to post a decent gain over prior year. I think you're also going to see more sellers coming to the market, which is also causing some stress in certain parts of this city. I'm going to talk more about that. But look at this. If you go back over the past year, the closings are up and down. Some are positive and a lot of them are negative. Now let's look at relative to history, okay? So for instance, if you go to February 2019, 2,396 homes. So just inside of 2,400 homes sold February of 2019, pre-COVID. Important, right? How did we do versus history? Now, March 2019, 3,115 homes sell. So if you come down here, we're not last month, February, prior month, we weren't at 2,400, we were around 2,000. We're not at 3,100, we're at 2,600. So again, buyer volume is languishing a little bit coming out of the gates of the new year. It'll be interesting to see how summer holds, because summer is when buyers get fierce. Buyers have a little more choice this summer, okay? And ultimately, that is part of the equation. Now look at this. This is new listings in Orlando. Look at this. Is a straight year of year-over-year gains, save this little run right here. So there's a couple negatives, but overall, 13% more people in Orlando put homes on the market. 6% more put homes on the market. January was up almost 18%. So much like the rest of the country, we came into a 2025 narrative where for the past 2 years, now remember, when we looked at the Florida chart, all 3 months of 2025 were up here relative to 2 years. You can see that the first 2 months of this year are kind of relative closer to the past. It's not really running away like the state is. But look at this too. So this one does represent nearly a high going back, or one of the highest producing March months. If you look at last year, March was 3,270 units. We're at 3,700 units. We're 500 units more than the same month last year. So you can see, again, this is the running narrative. The running narrative, not just in Orlando, not just in Florida, and not just across the country. Sellers are becoming more participants this year, okay? Buyers have been largely pulling away. A lot less buyers active because millions of Americans are not in affordability zone to buy. So this is just a challenge, because why? We just saw prices are not letting up and interest rates are not letting up. That rules out some buyers. And ultimately, what everybody watches is, how does this affect the equation on price when more sellers are starting to push in? Now let's look at our activity level, okay? This is the great indicator of when you are in danger of market slide. Will my prices come down because there's so many sellers on the market? And remember, this right here was one of the hottest sellers markets of all time. This right here means there's no homes on the market. Sellers can demand whatever terms they want. Now, it rose very direct out of the climbing interest rates in 2022. Then it started to settle the following year. We actually sold off a lot of that. It stabilized, and it's just been slowly bumping along. But look at this. You can see the path from last August till now. Look at it. It's flat. We're not seeing a relative stark jump. And look at history again, folks. Relative to history, this is not way out here, okay? So look at the level, and this is far back as I can go. But in history, in March of 2008, we had 25,000 homes on the market, 25,000 active unsold homes. We don't even have 10 right now. And you have to consider the population base in Orlando is one of the fastest growing in the nation, top 10, meaning we add 1,500 people. That's another home to build, another possible active listing. So theoretically, if we're in the same danger as we were in April of 2008, like I said, on the state level, you have to add another 30%. For us to be relative to this, we have a way higher ownership base than we did back here. More homes, more population to sell homes. So 30, 40,000. We are way off of that. As a result, look at the median sale price in Orlando. What does it look like? It looks dead flat. If you go right here, 441,800 is the current median, okay? You will go back to the peak. It is slightly ahead of where we lost our 3% interest rates. It's gone flat. It's gone flat. So you can see largely that not much has changed. But let's take a look at price across the state. So look at, by the way, isn't that interesting? Look at the south border. This, you're saying, Jared, why is it blue? Why is it red? I'm not used to seeing this blue color on the state of Florida. You're right. But here's the deal. This is year over year price. Okay, so this is showing price softness across the bottom of the U.S. Okay, now it's leaking in Atlanta's break even right now. You can see some of the South Carolina markets are starting to shift. But look, Florida's metros. Okay, this is Ocala. This is, we zoom in. Look, you can see these deep blue are really soft price-wise against last year. You can see the ones that are neutral-ish, like Orlando, were kind of breaking, kind of in the middle. So Orlando's price point to last year shows negative 1.2. Miami is 0.2. You can see these areas right here. They're not very populous, so we don't really look at them because there's not a lot of sales there. But you can see across, look at the Gulf side of the state. So you have Tampa down 3.3. Okay, as a major metro, negative 3.3. Down here, Northport, negative 6.8. Punta Gorda, negative 8.8. Negative 7.1 in Cape Coral. Naples and Marco Island, negative 5.9. Key West is down negative 3.2. So you can see as it relates to the entire state of Florida, Orlando and Miami tend to stay in a league of their own. You got to understand, each month when you're going against a year prior, you're going to have some that are really close to zero, maybe slightly positive. And again, that will then become representative of all of the areas inside your city. So you'd say, Jared, what am I looking at now? You're looking at that same chart, zip code by zip code. Now, what you're going to learn from this chart is that these little areas right here are largely neutral. They haven't moved much. Now, these are the light blue, almost clear, like they're down 0.5. They're not even 1% change of last year. Consider these, all this right here. Consider this flat. This is all flat, okay? This red is gaining, but you have to be careful with the red because most of these are lower populous areas and they fluctuate one month to the next. But these more populous areas, the ones that are starting to shade a little darker blue are going to be like, you have South Claremont right here. You have really the Kissimmee and Osceola area. So Kissimmee, Harmony, and then some of the older areas in the middle of town. Now, what can we glean from that? Okay, not a whole lot. I mean, ultimately there's some, if I were talking to a buyer and they would say, where do I want to live? I can tell you this, that the areas that have the highest appeal, and you could start with the luxury zip codes, which will be Winter Park, College Park, Lake Nona, and Dr. Phillips. Those, and you throw Winter Garden behind that, and Windermere is also in the mix. They're positive. They're positive or very close to zero. So some of the more affordable areas, some of the areas where buyers are going to grapple with affordability more, those are the ones where you're seeing more softness, okay? That's when you're seeing negative 2% or more. Now, let me show you one more thing. Housing market predictions from all of the agencies so far for 2025. We'll put an asterisk on Zillow because they've changed theirs. But the National Association of Realtors is predicting, from our economists, plus 2% nationwide. Zillow is predicting a negative 1.9. So Zillow just made a bunch of news splash because they came out and said, well, we're going to shift our outlook to negative 1.9 national from March to March. JP Morgan says plus 3. Housing Wire says plus 3.5. Fannie Mae, the mortgage giant, says plus 3.8. And CoreLogic, which is a huge data center with all of the real estate-based sales, positive 4.1. So here's the deal with interest rates this year, because these are a big factor. If we don't have reliability that prices are going to swing, then we have to look at interest rates. The Federal Reserve and all the market itself, the market at large, there's a lot of tracking on what they're saying about the Federal Reserve. I think it's the CME polling that they take. They're predicting 2 price cuts this year. Now, the challenge with this is the price cuts themselves are not likely going to be big price cuts as it looks right now. And obviously, things are moment by moment and worlds change and markets change. But right now, there's not a notion that we're going to have massive change in interest rates. But here's the deal. The Federal Reserve can largely affect mortgage rates. So if they want to do bond buying and things of that nature, the Federal Reserve bought basically mortgage bonds for years and artificially kept interest rates, depressed interest rates when they felt that they needed to preserve the market. Central planners doing what they do. But here's the deal. The other thing that I want you to understand is that while we have largely seen everything the same, so despite any transition in headlines, we don't really see any large scale change at the national level or at Florida level. Okay, so most of the market at large is largely the same. It hasn't changed. I also want you to know that if we experienced a market cycle, an actual crash, then you have to think back. We had the most epic crash in our lifetimes in 2008. It took 5 years to find a bottom. 5 years. So timing the marketplace is you may not ever see that crash in our lifetime again. I would contend that there's an argument to be made that it's absolutely unfolding. A correction is unfolding, but it doesn't look like that. But I would also say that timing it is not something that is practical. But the other thing you need to understand is recession itself. If recession comes, then interest rates will go down. So if we have an actual recession, an economic trial in the marketplace, interest rates are going to go down. That's how they respond whenever there is concern of recession, okay? But the other thing that I would tell you is what I was showing in these particular charts as it relates to median price. I have been telling you that this market cycle, everybody that is scared, they live their lives scared. They live their lives in fear. And they live them based on usually things that don't have to do with the housing market. They weren't exposed to the first cycle. Maybe they saw it or something, but usually they're bringing that reality into our time now on earth in this current age of the housing market. They're saying this is going to unfold. It's going to unfold any day now. It's going to collapse and all this. Here's the thing that I would contend is that we are already in the correction. It just is different. And here's how I'm saying that is that, again, if you've watched my channel, you know that if you go back to 50 years of history in Florida, our marketplace grows at 5% plus per year on a huge time frame. So we're talking 50 years of time. And if you are now running really flat, when you're supposed to go up 5% in 2023 and you didn't, that's a 5% correction. If you're supposed to go up 5% in 2024 and you didn't, that's a correction. So essentially, we're correcting in a different way, and so you're seeing our housing market, shifting in time because essentially we're bucking the trend. So even if we didn't have a 45% run up of price in a 2-year span of time overnight, like we did during COVID, even if we, if you were charting just normal path of 5% year over year running up the hill, then before long, time will catch up and you will be there. And I would tell you that you just be patient. And ultimately, one of the things I want you to understand too, when you're relating to the housing market in Orlando, these housing markets you see that are clear or neutral or orange, they're still tight markets. They're not even, I would say in some of them, they're not necessarily buyer favored. They're not like, oh, the buyer can come in and win. And like, you're not paying more than last year though. That's the thing. Like you're negotiating break even to last year because at that point there's someone wanting to buy it. If they could buy it relative to last year, proof is right here that that's what people are paying and they're selling for. They're trading around that number. Okay. Now, if the home needs work, things of that nature, there's things that will affect what you eventually can pay. And sometimes you can over-index the market. Like in these areas down here where, 34747, for instance, this is Airbnb down by Kissimmee. These areas, you can set new records on what those homes have traded for in 3, 4, 5 year spans of time. Like I'm negotiating a deal right now. They'll blow your mind. So that's the reality. But let's continue. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. and I've been off. I want to just kind of give a personal story that this is a late weekend review update because my father-in-law is in really rough shape, and I've been to the hospital nearly daily. I meant to get this out last week, but it has been crazy. So that's it. Hope you all have a great week.